Hello, my name is Colin Maitland. I'm a Microsoft Dynamics CRM Certified Technology Specialist. I'm also a Microsoft Certified Trainer, and I work with Magnetism Solutions, a Microsoft business partner located in New Zealand. In this presentation, I'm going to demonstrate the status values for SLA KPI instance records in Dynamics 365 for resolved and cancelled cases that have a related Enhanced Service Level Agreement or SLA. In particular, this demonstration will highlight, using the example of a Resolve By KPI, how the status of the SLA KPI instance is always set to non-compliant rather than to cancelled for cancelled cases, even when the case has been cancelled prior to either the warning time or the failure time of the Resolve By KPI on the SLA. I will then demonstrate how the Resolve By KPI can be reconfigured so that the status is always set to succeeded rather than to non-compliant for cases that are cancelled prior to the failure time being reached. This demonstration highlights an issue whereby the status of a Resolve By KPI associated with a cancelled case is not itself set to cancelled as might possibly be expected or desired, and how the timer for the Resolve By KPI actually continues counting down even after the case has been cancelled until the Resolve By KPI has reached the status of non-compliant. If we look at the configuration of the status option set for an SLA KPI instance in Dynamics 365, we can see that the possible statuses are in progress, non-compliant, nearing non-compliance, paused, succeeded, and cancelled. If we look at the configuration of the timer control for the Resolve By KPI on the case form in Dynamics 365, we can see that the success condition is aligned with the status of succeeded, the failure condition is aligned with the status of non-compliant, the warning condition is aligned with the status of nearing non-compliance, and the cancel condition is aligned with the status of cancelled. In this presentation, I'm using a Customised Case Form that specifically displays the status of the case, the timer control for the Resolve By KPI, and the details of the related SLA KPI instance, such as the warning time, failure time, succeeded on, and status. In this presentation, we are particularly interested in the status. This sample default SLA for cases is being used for the first two examples in this presentation. This is an enhanced SLA with one related Resolve By KPI SLA item. The Resolve By KPI is configured so that the warning time is at 1 minute and the failure time is at 3 minutes after the creation of a case. These times are short for the purposes of this demonstration. For performance reasons, a best practice configuration for SLA items is to ensure that these are configured to be more than 1 hour. The key component of this configuration, however, is that the success criteria for the Resolve By KPI is configured as case status equals resolved. That is, if the case is resolved before the failure time is reached, regardless of whether or not the case was resolved before or after the warning time is reached, the outcome will be succeeded. Otherwise, the outcome will be non-compliant. This is my first example. This example demonstrates the status of the SLA KPI instance being set to succeeded, as expected, as a result of the case being closed as resolved before the failure time is reached. Notice that the status of the Resolve By KPI is currently in progress. The timer control displays a countdown of the time remaining to resolve the case within the Resolve By KPI success time frame. I will now close the case as resolved. It does take the Dynamics 365 platform approximately 20 seconds to recognize this change of case status and to then update the status of the SLA KPI instance to succeeded accordingly. A screen refresh is also required in order for the timer control to be refreshed, so that it also displays the status of succeeded. It is important to be aware of the fact that it is not the timer control that updates the status of the SLA KPI instance, but rather it is the Dynamics 365 platform that performs the update. This is my second example. This example demonstrates the status of the SLA KPI instance being set to non-compliant after the case has been cancelled prior to either the warning time or the failure time being reached. Let's fast forward. I will now close the case as cancelled. It might be expected or desired that the status of the SLA KPI instance might be set to cancelled, but this is not the case. Instead, the status of the SLA KPI instance initially remains set to in progress, and the timer control continues to count down even though the case has been cancelled. Let's fast forward again. We now see that the status of the SLA KPI instance has been updated to nearing non-compliance when the warning time is reached after 1 minute. Let's fast forward again. We now see that the status of the SLA KPI instance has been updated to non-compliant when the failure time is reached after 3 minutes. Even though the case was closed as cancelled prior to either the warning time or the failure time being reached, the status of the SLA KPI instance was updated from in progress to nearing non-compliance and then to non-compliance rather than being updated to cancelled. This is the main point of this demonstration. This updated sample default SLA for cases is being used for the third example in this presentation. As with the previous two examples, this is an enhanced SLA with one related Resolve By KPI SLA item that is configured so the warning time is at 1 minute and the failure time is at 3 minutes after the creation of a case. Again, these times are short for the purposes of this demonstration. The key change made to this sample default SLA, however, is that the success criteria for the Resolve By KPI, rather than being configured as case status equals resolved, is now configured as case status equals resolved or case status equals cancelled. That is, if the case is closed as resolved or closed as cancelled before the failure time is reached, regardless of whether or not the case is closed before or after the warning time is reached, the outcome will be succeeded. This is my third example. This example demonstrates the status of the SLA KPI instance being set to succeeded rather than to non-compliant after the case has been cancelled, as was the case with the previous example. Let's fast forward. I will now close the case as cancelled. This time the status of the SLA KPI instance has been set to succeeded rather than continuing to count down to nearing non-compliance and then to non-compliance, as was the case with the second example in this presentation. This point is important because this example demonstrates how the success criteria for the Resolve By KPI can be reconfigured to achieve this alternate behavior for cancelled cases. Finally, if you want to report on SLAs for cases, taking into account whether or not the case was resolved or cancelled, it is important to segment the reporting by the case status in addition to the status of the SLA KPI instance so that resolved cases can be clearly distinguished from cancelled cases.